Hello and welcome once again to Living and Active. Welcome to the playlist Analytical Hermeneutics. I am going to try to get through this. I don't know if this is going to work. Let me start right off the bat and say I have no idea if this is going to work the way I think it is in my head. What I think is going to happen is that I will be able to give a clear demonstration of how it comes to be that so many churches, so many pastors, preachers, whatever, teachers, uh, who all say they teach from the Bible, and listen to my wording here, that's going to be very important as we go, who all say they are teaching, preaching, whatever, from the Bible, from the Word of God, can say so honestly, because they are preaching from the Word, not necessarily preaching the Word, and be so wildly different in the teachings they push. Okay, I'm going to give you a walkthrough demonstration, practical demonstration with uninspired text. Okay, let's get that said. I am not claiming to be using any text inspired by the Lord. This is something that I wrote and spent most of last night writing myself on a typewriter. Okay, look, you can see there's white out. Sorry, there's correcting fluid everywhere. Okay, there are scribbles and omissions and words spelled wrong that had to be corrected. This is obviously an original and uninspired and flawed work that I'm going to be reading from. Okay. Next, I have to say and remind people, this is the video that I said I was going to do in the post tab. So if you haven't seen that, heads up, in the post tab, heads up. This is going to be kind of different in that I am going to be playing the part of the bad guy. I want you to pay attention to the sentence I just said. I'm going to be playing the part of the bad guy. I'm going to be playing a part of the guy that has to prove his scholarly credibility in the message he's preparing to give. Okay? There's going to be a point, and I'm going to let you know when it is, not yet, but there's going to be a point where after that point, until I clue you in that we're back in reality, that I'm not role playing anymore, you're not going to be able to trust what I'm doing. Okay? And I want you to pay attention to how smoothly it goes once I get into that, and how easy it is to be sucked into the process that's used to appear scholarly for the sake of appearing scholarly, not necessarily to rightly divide the word of truth, but to prove one's, I guess, importance in terms of relaying things to people. Another thing I need to point out is I need to get through this kind of quickly, because I think I figured out that the recording limit to this camera is about 22 minutes. So I need to get through to the content of this video, and if there's anything I miss in the conducting of this exercise or the explanation, I will have to take care of it in the comments. I won't be able to stitch this one together. Okay. So as I said in the post, giving the heads up, this is the final caveat, and then we go into the actual exercise. As I said in the post, I caught myself in this twice. Okay? So I'm telling you what I'm about to do, then I'm going to do what I'm about to do, and then I'm going to remind you after I get done doing what I'm about to do that I've told you what I'm about to do. Okay? And we're going to learn through this together. Okay? As soon as I start reading, I'm going to be in character. Like I said, I will let you know when I'm coming out of character, okay? A moment, if you please. To begin, it must first be established that, at this moment, and for the time being, there exists neither specific audience nor predetermined subject, intent, or direction. If an objective must herein be offered, let us settle upon the notion that I, far removed from the glories of a now irrelevant era, prefer to simply and cheerily engage upon the nobler minutiae common in the diligent pursuit of skilful, deliberate application of both industry and intellect. More to the point, dear reader, I have set myself into the often tedious role of writer or alternatively narrator. I have done so for no more defensible reason than that I just feel like taking a lengthy turn at the helm of what of that most stalwart of devices, the vintage mechanical typewriter. Similarly, I have obliged myself to the rejuvenation of a more artful and reasoned use of what may contemporarily only laughingly be referred to as a common native tongue. To these ends, with no small amount of dramatic flair, I have in my immediate surrounds a conveniently sized and located coffee grinding and brewing machine, a selection of aged sheets of lined paper, a partial bottle of water, and, ironically enough, a now obsolete laptop computer streaming a charming compilation of radio broadcast recordings which first served homes and workplaces inhabited by various individual members of a much sturdier sort of populace than we currently operate in some 90 years ago on the social media platform that, for all the good that might be said comes of it, I am most eager to be shut of. In very short order, I shall add to this complement a steaming bowl of freshly prepared instant ramen noodles. I shall, having mentioned the task to which I will be presently applying my energies, now be taking my leave, soon returning to once again bend myself to studious effort and decidedly deliberate communication. In the interim, I bid you Godspeed. According to the rigid and inviolate demands of the style in which I have chosen to write, since I brought the reader into my own timeline via first-person exposition, I am now constrained, if I am to persist, to rejoin this undertaking by somehow indicating both the passage of time and, in this case, the preservation of setting. To accomplish the former, a small line of 3 stars has been placed between this section and the one preceding it. As for the latter, it might do well to relay that the aforementioned ramen has long since been consumed, my coffee mug refilled, and the laptop silenced as the cognitive backdrop I had been attempting to establish was repeatedly being disrupted by the glaring intrusion of advertisements for products and services that would most certainly never have been allowed to assault the environments wherein denizens of polite society might find themselves gathered in the 1930s. In its place, it shall be allowed for the very small desk lamp and the equally diminutive electric fan which huddled together in front of my typewriter to conspire together with the absence of the air conditioner's droning nuisance to convince me of the similarity to some golden age of radio detective noir drama. If it please the reader, permit me to further impose upon the pleasure of your attention by humoring me, momentarily, that I may suggest, in more evident fashion, the current exploits of this author's stage-like imagination, by your leave. It would be so stinking easy. Absolutely nothing illegal about it all anymore. A 6-story ride in the elevator, a nod and a grunt to Joe or Jimmy or Bert in the lobby, then up 1 block and over 4 to the corner stand for a pack of smokes, a bottle of hooch, a bag of salted peanuts, and yesterday's paper to fill in for the umbrella he'd undoubtedly forget on his way out the door. Not a single person with a shred of empathy in the world, not a single person with a shred of empathy in them would blame him, not one bit. The very thought of 3 fingers or so of even mediocre brandy and a few long drags was enough to trigger the tactile memory of his right hand supporting the phantom glass and cigarette simultaneously. So stinking easy. Speaking of stink, a quick breath of a reminder of his current whereabouts and the task before him. He felt filthy, not just from the week's worth of stagnant late summer city air saturating his apartment. He felt filthy, not just from the week's worth of stagnant late summer city air saturating his environment either. With his right hand still cradling the imaginary glass, the fingers of his left remained stuck fast to the keys of his usually trusty Remington typewriter as if they had been welded in place. Either welded or, as though having been suddenly cursed with an awareness all their own, were steadfastly refusing to leave their chosen sanctuary lest they stray too far and even accidentally make contact with the file folder sitting closed on the table next to both of the detective's usually trusty Remingtons. Closed because he didn't need to open it to see what was waiting for him inside. Every hellish image, every unspeakably gruesome detail was seared directly into his conscious mind. He could only pray they wouldn't stay there for the rest of his life. Speaking of prayer, he wondered how often people prayed for amnesia or dementia. God, if you're listening, please don't think me greedy for asking for both. With a reflexive burst of violent energy and a smooth efficiency common to well-tested men of action, the detective stood and pushed away from the table, sending his hapless chair crashing to the floor. Now on the move, he swept up his fedora in one hand and keys in the other. As the door slammed to a thunderous close, the forgotten umbrella stood alone in the corner to bear silent witness and await his return. Now, if we take the context of what is written here, we can see that the small line of 3 stars, means that the text go on. We don't have time to get into that here. So we will deal in the time that we have in front of us with the text that I've just read. Obviously, the author wants to establish a sense of intelligence, of being skilled with how he uses words. This is something that may take 2 or 3 times to read through in order to be understood well and clearly. But again, for the sake of the time constraint that we're under, I'm going to allow you to do all of that that homework, busy stuff, the really deep dive on your own time. For our purposes, we're going to deal with the story contained inside of the text. We are going to let's see, where does it begin? Okay, it would be so stinking easy. So we are seeing a dramatic tonal shift in the author speaking as himself, and when he gets into storytelling mode. This is basic context establishment, how you can know, what is being given literally and what is being delivered as a figurative or as an analogy or what have you. So we have at the beginning of the story here, obviously this person is considering something that he is feeling a little bit convicted about about actually carrying out. This could be a temptation. This obviously has to do something with going down the road from his 6-story apartment, wherever he is in the city, to the corner stand, and in the middle of the night, presumably, and buying a bottle of hooch, the text says, and a pack of smokes. We are under the presumption here that initially we're under the presumption here that this is something that he is trying to avoid doing for some reason, whether it's pressure or whatever. And we continue. We have him being brought back to the reality of his situation by, it says, stink, quick breath of a reminder. This could be some sort of mental trigger where he might be having a dissociative episode, and so something in his thinking process, maybe the repetition of the word stinking, sort of kicks him back into the here and now, what he's doing. And what he's doing, apparently, is sort of sitting in his apartment, in his living space, and he's still having issues with the association with where he is, keeping in his mind present setting and place of where he's at. And here we have mention of him retaining sort of a muscle memory of holding a glass filled with alcohol and a cigarette at the same time. And then it goes to a specific mention of a usually trusty Remington typewriter. And then we contrast that with the mention of his left hand almost refusing to move for fear of touching a file folder, presumably of some kind of case, and because of what's inside of it. And then we have a mention of, instead of one usually trusty Remington typewriter, we have a mention of both usually trusty Remingtons, and then the specific noun typewriter is left out. And then we have the effect that this case file is having on him. Again, this could be more disassociative things going on, establishing sort of a degradation, like a progression of a worsening mental state. And then he has a bit of a moment of clarity where he's considering praying for help in the form of some sort of mental disease or diminishment to take the memories from him. And then at that point where he would be normally seeing clarity, we have this wild burst of energy and action, and all of a sudden, when he had just decided, possibly against doing what he was considering at the beginning of the story, he leaps up, things go flying, and he's heading out the door very quickly. And then we have some kind of weird mention here, kind of like a harkening back to him forgetting his umbrella. And yeah, the umbrella, the forgotten umbrella, stood alone in the corner to bear silent witness and await his return. Okay, so there are some important questions that we need to ask here. These questions being, one, since there's no mention of what the umbrella is bearing witness to, we could, if we wanted to, we could say that there's a reason we need to ask how many usually trusty Remington whatevers are still remaining on the table. One could be a typewriter, maybe the other one is his sidearm. Is it still there? Is that what the umbrella is bearing witness to? Also, are we being brought into a scenario where it is deep into the point where he is reviewing the case, and he's writing his reports, and he has a sudden revelation of who the perpetrator is, and he knows this person, he knows how to find them. And so the initial mention of uh, his desire to not go outside and go get the alcohol and the cigarette was a misdirection. And so now we have to assume that he's possibly going out to take care of this criminal, vigilante style, or is this such a disassociative thing because he has realized that he's been blacking out and that he himself is a perpetrator? We don't have the answers really for this stuff inside the text, but there's enough here where we can be forgiven for asking the questions. And I think if there's room for us to ask the questions, I think that we should. So we are out of time, and so with that encouragement to get into the Word for yourself and study the Word, I pray that you have a good week, and I will see you next week. End scene. I'm back. Now I have to end this and do a part 2 because I am almost out of time on this video. I will be with you guys again very shortly. Bad guys gone. I'm Leland again. Let's do this. Okay, are we back? We are back. Excellent. This is part 2 of my little this is not mine, okay? That's one of the ways I was caught in this. I might be able to stitch these back to back together. I don't know. We'll see. But I had to shoot them separately because I didn't want the camera to cut off recording in the middle of the scene that I just went through. So if I'm not able to stitch them together, this is going to be part 2 of a 2-part series to get this exercise played out. I told you in the post that I was giving the heads up for this exercise that I caught myself twice. I told you in the part 1 that I was going to tell you exactly how I caught myself both times. And full disclosure, they're not pretty. So what I read at the beginning, the really highly intellectual, overly abundantly, just nonsensically verbose and intellectual scholarly language, I was writing in real time exactly what was going on in my head. And I was telling you in the last video that I'm telling you exactly what I'm going to do, even as I'm writing that part. I open with, to begin, it must first be established that, at this moment, and for the time being, there exists neither specific audience nor predetermined subject, intent, or direction. If an objective must herein be offered, let us settle upon the notion that I, far removed from the glories of a now irrelevant era, prefer to simply and cheerily engage upon the nobler minutiae common in the diligent pursuit of skillful, deliberate application of both industry and intellect. More to the point, dear reader, I have set myself into the often tedious role of writer or alternatively narrator. I have done so for no more defensible reason than that I just feel like taking a lengthy turn at the helm of that most stalwart of devices, the vintage mechanical typewriter. I admitted in the very first paragraph that I wrote as I was writing it that I had no preconceived direction for this thing I was writing. I was just sitting down to write it, okay? That's the first way I caught myself. By the time I got done writing the narrative of the story, I had convinced myself to keep going past the 3-star break and write out a series of questions as if I had been planning this as a lesson all along. That was the temptation. That's what happened in my head. That's the first way I got caught. Okay? My own, it wasn't even a net. I didn't start off to set a trap. I just wanted to write something and write it well and enjoy the practice of writing something somewhat scholarly with a higher degree of language usage than what I'm used to hearing. I don't have much exposure to people who know how to talk this way or communicate this way. So I was writing it basically for myself. I just wanted to see it done and practice communicating in such a way. And I wanted to do it with my typewriter. That's literally why I sat down to write it. No big brain moments of, I know what I'll do. I can develop a lesson and thereby prove my intellectual superiority. No, it was just me being dumb, using words that are words and stylings that are way too archaic for common use. Just basically to do it, just to do it, just to practice doing it as a writer, sharpening my skills. That's exactly what I sort of set out to do, but not having a direction for it or a purpose for it. So then I just kept rambling and writing. Whatever came into my head, that's what I was writing, blah, blah, blah. Literally, as promised in the first paragraph, no plan, no direction, no intent, no intended audience. I was just writing. Then I got to the point, and I'm literally giving a play-by-play in very flowery language. I got hungry. I had the coffee, I had my water bottle, whatever. I got hungry. I got a little snackish. So I went to go make some ramen. So I described that just for the sake of finding a more interesting way of describing the act of making ramen and eating ramen and incorporating that experience into what I was writing. That's all it was. There's nothing academic or scholarly about it. When I came back, I go through an overly specific explanation of why I put the 3-star line in between the two sections to demonstrate that there had been some time passed and that I gave an explanation that didn't need to be given just to practice giving the explanation. At this point, I still had no idea what this was going to become. None. I didn't think it was going to become anything. I thought at this point, I was still thinking, I'm going to write this, I'm going to put it away inside the typewriter case. Nobody is ever going to see this, and it's going to be some weird, goofy, nerdy thing that I did just because I felt like typing. So that's what it started out as. As I came back, and I realized that the music that I've been playing in the background, which is what I was talking about with the laptop, I had some 1930s, 1940s radio broadcast recordings playing on YouTube in the background as I was typing. Help set the mood. When I came back, it was playing ads for things that really took me out of the environment of being just somebody hanging out on their typewriter, not a whole lot of high tech around there, just putting themselves to the work of developing their skills as a writer, storytelling, and things like that. As I was doing that, I had also shut off my air conditioner because I was being annoyed by the constant drone in the background, exactly like I say in the description that I give. I'm telling everybody exactly what I'm doing as I'm doing it in the writing. Okay? As I was doing that to kind of bring myself back into the environment, the kind of the mood that I wanted, I realized that I had a strong desire to get out of the highly academic language I was using and go into storytelling mode, but I didn't want to switch papers and train of thought to do so, so I just created a transition between the way I had been writing and the tone and style that I would use if I was writing a detective noir radio drama. Again, I'm telling people that I'm going through this process as I'm doing it. So then I start the story. Okay? And here's the second part I caught myself in. Okay? Right at the beginning, I knew the story was simply about a man tempted to respond to whatever he was experiencing by turning to alcohol. This is my own testimony. This is something I would have done. I would have gone after rum and not scotch. I think, no, brandy is what I put in the story. I personally would have gone after rum, but it would have been the same thing. Find anything that's open 24 hours, and it doesn't matter if it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Go there, get your gut rot and your pack of smokes, and then you're just good. You know, the little inner baby inside of your emotional self that needs to be burped is placated, and you can drink as much or as little, whatever, as you want, to whatever level of medication you feel is necessary, and carry on. I was literally describing through the character. I don't even think I decided that he was a detective at the time. I had thought at first it was going to be a reporter talking about a detective on a case, more removed from the scenario than it ended up being. So at first I didn't even have an idea that it was going to be the detective himself. Okay, so I described the process he was going to go through, kind of in the internal language that he would have had as he did it. That is from the beginning what I had intended once I started writing the story. I was telling the story of someone who was struggling with a dependency on alcohol and tobacco to handle their emotional stress. That's all it was. That's all it started out to be. As I went through it and I introduced the main character as a detective, and the details of him writing up the reports and going through case files and what he is experiencing as someone who has seen way too much, especially in this case, I got the idea, okay, I'm being honest here, I got the idea as I'm writing the escalation to tie all of it together. Actually, technically I caught myself 3 times. To tie the whole thing in together and then to come back, remembering what I had did for the break in time when I went to go get ramen, to come back and continue schooling the people I was talking to with the really highly academic language. You give demonstrations from the story I had told, forgetting that I had no direction or intent when I wrote it. And as soon as I had that thought, I was tempted to present all of this as if I had planned the whole thing all along, especially when I got to the part of the escalation, the sudden shift in tone, the increase in the action, and then the cliffhanger ending. The questions that I asked, I had to abbreviate. Truthfully, I had to abbreviate the what if section of the sermon that was being given by the bad guy character, because I was going to include more questions that could be asked from the alleged empty spaces in the text of the story. I had quite a few. I should have written them down before I started all of this, but I knew if I did, there's no way I could get it inside of the very not artificial time constraint of having to shoot in 22-minute segments. But there were all kinds of questions, and I was going to write the questions when I came back inside what I was writing. I was going to write out the questions with a little bit of an introduction. It's like, okay, now I'm going to put you to the test. I'm going to sit here and see how good you were as the reader of catching on to the fact that I may have been doing something all along that I said from the very beginning, truthfully said from the very beginning, I wasn't doing. Highly dishonest. Disgustingly dishonest. I was immediately convicted as I started formatting in my head how I was going to lay out the questions and weave in the little gotcha moments. The Lord, Yahweh, Holy Spirit, probably all of the persons of the triune Godhead took me to task and got me back in hand very quickly and let me know in no uncertain terms that I was in the process of doing absolutely everything that I warn brothers and sisters in grace against their capital P pastors doing to the text and leading them astray. For the sake of establishing my own scholarliness, I had been tempted and found myself sort of willing to backload intent that was never there, as if I was some sort of academic mastermind that had created this tapestry of wisdom and knowledge and experience and skill with using words to craft this three-dimensional, four-dimensional, five-dimensional intellectual obstacle course to challenge people to examine their grasp of the English language, how much attention they pay to when they're reading something, if they retain contextual clues or whatever else for long enough periods of time to help them with lengthy passages. All of these things. This is all horrible stuff. It sounds horrible because it is horrible. This is the temptation that I was under. This is what your brother in Christ, me, was tempted to do with this stupid little thing that I was just going to write just to practice using flowery language and then put away for no one to see. And as soon as I realized that the temptation for me to do that was so strong, and I had the understanding that that is what leads capital P pastors, and how easily they can be taken aside, because it is a strong temptation, let me tell you. Oh my goodness. Once you realize that something can be done with something that you're working on that you didn't intend, the temptation to ascribe to yourself that wisdom, that insight, or whatever it is, that can only come from God. God is able to use this the way that it ended up being able to be used. But it has nothing to do with my intention. As a matter of fact, the biggest, most compelling evidence that there is that God is using this in a way that I never intended was that it is made more effective by the snares the multiple snares in this little exercise that I myself almost fell into. I almost changed my intention for writing the little story insert to make it darker because it fit what the scholarly thing to do would have been. It would have gone a long way to proving my level of scholarship, whatever, to making myself seem more wise, smart, whatever. This is another great evidence that our Father keeps us in hand. Is that now I'm having difficulty even finding words to describe what I'm trying to talk about. But you guys are catching on. I have faith in all of my subscribers, even the ones that I don't know who they are, that you are smart enough to catch on exactly to what I'm trying to tell you. The presentation of this text with the artificial constraints of, well, we don't have time to get into the really intellectual stuff and explore how that might be helpful in setting genuine context for the story, because if I had stayed in that first paragraph in any of my message after the reading of the story, it would have been immediately apparent that I was making all the rest of the nerdy scholarly stuff up, because the text and the intent of the text was to establish the fact that it had been written without intent. In Scripture, every single portion of the text of Scripture, as originally intended by Yahweh, by the Father, when giving the Holy Spirit the command, the instruction, however that relationship works, to inspire human authors to record his testimony of himself, his intention is the only possible interpretation. There are many applications. You can read through this little, what is this? One side, two sides, what, 3/4 of another side. You can read through this for days and dream up all kinds of really heady, nerdy, geeky stuff to artificially insert into it to give it deeper and deeper levels of meaning. That's kind of what I was hinting at in the message by suggesting that maybe the dude is having a dissociative break and he's gotten to the point where he's blacking out. He's actually committing these crimes himself. Some of the other questions I was going to ask, well, is he going to go get the alcohol to drink it and make himself drunk in the hopes of keeping himself from committing more of these? Is he going out to, I think I did ask this, and is he going out to go take out the actual killer? But this is how it happens. Not everything that's done to mishandle the word happens with malicious intent. A lot of it does. But sometimes it's just as simple as following the workflow of getting ready to do your paid gig that you're expected to do if you want to keep feeding your family, to go stand in front of the congregation and have something to give them that they will applaud you for. It is incredibly tempting. So, a little grace to capital P pastors, and I need to do this too. It is incredibly tempting to put stuff there that isn't there, just to make it look like you did more work. God spoke to us plainly in his text. This is what I say all the time. But even I, apparently, am not above adding things there to make myself seem more relevant in my viewers, my subscribers' ability to approach the Word, to approach God as he is and get to know him, because that is his intention. If it's not there, if it's not in the text, it's not an opening for a question. It means that there is no room for questioning, because what needs to be said has already been said. And with that, until the next video, if there is one, and there might not be, I'll be with you.